Okay, as we move along, this group had a very unique task in that they were instrumental in the sports broadcast live stream that we did with the Central Penn baseball team in 2019. What was most unique about this project from their perspective is they actually started on this project last term. I actually don't ever recall having students start on a project for a class before the class had even started. But because of how the baseball season went and when we were going to be calling the games, it really was an important component of them. And as I'm sure that they will share with you, and as Mr. Heckard back here and Mr. Folk can also share with you, opening day this year for us was not one that, well, it's certainly memorable, but not necessarily in a good way. It was 35 degrees. I've never heard of a baseball game being played in 35-degree weather, but I have to give Quentin a lot of credit because he pitched very well in that game. So, without further ado, they're going to share with you not only just about the broadcast, because there was so much more to their project than just going and setting up a camera and doing a broadcast of our baseball team. So I'm going to turn it over to Dylan Kleintop in one of his last ever performances here at Central Penn College, and Tyler Coleman.
How are y'all doing this evening, I should say.
Wonderful.
We don't have to introduce ourselves because you guys already know who we are. So, like Professor Miller said, we did the baseball live stream project, and it was actually started last year by the kids sitting back there in the back, Brian Christiana and Ian Kemmerer. They actually started this whole live stream thing. They presented this last year, so Tyler and I took it to the next level and did it this year. Before we begin, Tyler's going to hand out the folder. Basically, what's in the folder is what we did before every single game. We'll explain what is actually in the folder later in the presentation. So, throughout our time here, and like Miller said, my time here is coming to an end. We both had to work on many different projects, and this was in fact the biggest project. It took us about 2 to 3 months to just go through all of it and complete it. We had the opportunity to work closely with Professor Miller of the Nightly News, members of the Nightly News media team and members of the baseball team, 2 guys back there in the back. Like Miller said, we started our project the second week of break. So most of you are wondering, how are they almost done with their project on the first week of class? We were here over breakthrough.
So the process. So prior to attending every home game, there was a sheet of 14 different items that we had to go over. Dylan and I communicated back and forth about how we were going to break this down. So I took the first 7 on the sheet that we have listed in the binder, and my job was to go out and find the Central Penn information, their schedule, the players' roster, the statistics, both pitching and batting, and even coaches' information. Dylan's job was to go through and find all the information about the opposing team. And I think I can speak for Dylan when we say finding some of the information was difficult. There were even times we had to communicate with Professor Miller, say, hey, where do we find this? Could you point us in the direction of where to go to find the correct information? So, yeah.
There were some moments where, when they were playing a Penn State team, that was easy to find the division standings. But when they played a team like Clark Summit, which is in the binder, we couldn't find the division standings at all. They would have standings listed, but there were standings of 50 other teams. So why would we take a print screen of 50 other teams? Miller would just tell us, don't worry about it, it's okay. Just kind of remember where they were in the standings, stuff like that. So like Coleman said here, what we looked for, you see it on the checklist that Mrs. Musser has right there. So we looked for pitching stats, fielding stats, batting averages, coaches' information, divisional standings, and the schedule. We were also provided with live reads. So in between innings, we would say something that would be going on around campus, something to look forward to in the future, stuff about the club, which was provided to us before the season by Professor Miller, and marketing kind of mixed in with that as well. That's just a picture of the checklist that you'll see coming around. Like Tyler said, he did the first 7, then I did the last.
Yeah, and again, we had to go through all that information every game that we covered, because if you follow sports, statistics change every game. So we had to make sure that we were getting the correct information for each live stream that we performed.
And for score sheets, when it was a doubleheader, we had to print 4 score sheets. When it was a single game, we just had to print 2. So we had to make sure that they were playing a doubleheader. Sometimes we would go in and print all the stuff out, and then we'd get the call, hey, the game is canceled. So have fun with that.
So our first aspect of communication, we wrote about this in our paper, was broadcasting. Just the first key to broadcasting, being able to communicate well and being knowledgeable. Being knowledgeable, I kind of relate to just knowing what we're talking about, whether it was anything to do with Central Penn or the opposing team that they were playing for. Also, anything that we talked about in live reads, to know what was going on here at school. I know on the live streams that we did, Professor Miller and I kind of talked about different sports and stuff going on here at school. So just knowing what you were talking about is key. Always make sure you're accurate, as I stated, going through and finding the updated statistics. And another point to that is whenever you're doing a live stream and you're talking about different people, it is key that you pronounce the player's name correctly. And one thing I can relate to that is I'm an Atlanta Braves fan, and I was recently watching a game on MLB Network, and their player Ronald Acuna, his name was just being butchered by the commentator. He was calling him Ronald Acuna. So to me, it's kind of, you're sitting here like diminishing your work and everything that you're putting into what you're doing because you're not doing the correct job of making sure that you're pronouncing players' names right. And the third aspect there is just working well as a team. As we stated, I worked with Dylan, Brian, Professor Miller, even Andrew Day did photography for us. So it was a team effort. This wasn't something that we could really do by ourselves, and it's something that took a whole team, just being in communication of where to be, when to be, what we were doing, and things like that.
News gathering. So Tyler would focus more on the broadcasting, where I would focus on gathering the news. I made one appearance on the live stream. It was towards the end of the season, but I focused more on talking to players during the game, getting their feedback after the game, keeping the statistics of both pitching, batting, the score. So I would find myself, walking around the dugouts, speaking to the players. I would find myself talking to Jerry Biller, who actually kept the stats for the athletic department. I would say, hey, are my stats correct? If there was a weird play or something we didn't know, how to score it or something, I would go ask Jerry real quick, how do we score that? What do we say? I would relay the information to Professor Miller. So that's how I was kind of the middleman, keeping everything running. I would double check the checklist. I would more than double check it. I would do 3 or 4 times. I would say, hey Tyler, make sure you have this, make sure we have this. I think there was maybe the first game that, we took the reins by ourselves. We might have missed 1 or 2 things, but Professor Miller was understanding because, it was our first time ever doing that. After that, I don't think we missed anything. We came well prepared for everything. And learn how to become a student reporter. I actually am a student reporter here. I work for the marketing department, so I kind of knew what to do. Tyler never really wrote for the school here for stories and stuff, so it was kind of, helping him keep stats, training him to be a student reporter. And right after a game, we would go and write the stories real quick, send them right to Professor Miller that night, and he would put them up on social media the next day. So it had to happen quick.
Yeah, so content creation. As Dylan kind of just touched on, we had to write the game stories after each game. So if it was a doubleheader, we would kind of break it down, and I would take game notes for the first game and then write the story, and then I would help live stream the second game while Dylan took the notes and would write the story for that. So the articles, as he said, were not always easy, trying to keep stats of everything that was going on, scoring plays, who was doing what. If we had to kind of communicate with Professor Miller or Jerry Biller and ask, hey, how was this play scored as? So we were making sure that we were getting it right. And then, as we said, that the articles were shared on the Nightly News blog. I also have posted stuff we've done to our LinkedIn and my Facebook and different social media accounts, so people can see what we're doing here at school.
And it also seemed like throughout the whole season, and Tyler can touch on this, he always got to write on the exciting games, the one-run games, whereas I got to write on the blowouts. And it was, quite a short story because there wasn't really much to say. They scored a lot of runs, and he got to write on, Quentin pitching in 35-degree weather, pitching a great game. full spectacular catch, all in his stories, and I just got, the bland stories, but I still try to make it fun. So, small group communication, like we said before, we worked with the group on setting up, cleaning up. Although the games were at 2, we were expected to be there by 1, so we could help set up the canopy, carry the chairs, the table, set up the Mevo, the camera you guys see right in front of you. We could help set that up, get the iPad working, make sure it's gonna work for the game. Hand out like the stats to Professor Miller, Tyler, whoever was calling the game, Brian. We had to keep talking to the athletic director, Michael Nill, and Jerry Biller, because it was hard during the game that we weren't in the press box because everyone had to be completely quiet so that the people could hear us talking. So we had to keep them quiet, which was, it's kind of hard at a sporting event to keep people kind of quiet. We also had to bounce ideas off each other, what can we talk about? For the live reads, sometimes things end. So like let's say the date is April 27th and we're calling the game April 28th. Why would we say something that happened on April 27th, right? So we're going to cross that out and maybe say something new that maybe isn't on the live read paper that hasn't been posted yet. We're going to go and say, hey, look forward to this coming up on campus. And we also didn't hesitate to ask for help. I know I asked for help quite a few times. I do know baseball, but I don't know baseball that well as much as some of the players do. I found myself asking Jerry some questions, how to score this, and then I would ask Professor Miller some questions. I know Tyler would ask around some questions too. So we didn't know everything about baseball, but we tried to learn as much as we could.
So the podcast, Dylan and I actually had the opportunity to host an all-students podcast with some of the Knights baseball players, and Christian and Quentin were actually 2 of them that we got to talk with. And that was certainly an experience. I know the night before we were scheduled to do this podcast, Dylan and I were kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. What questions should we ask these guys? Because we always didn't want to ask the same questions, so we would have to kind of take a review of what the season was like, what happened, and then that kind of gave us an idea of what to ask people.
So we're going to show you about 2 to 3 minutes of the podcast.
Special edition of the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and this is a very special occasion for the Nightly News because this will be one of the first all-student-led podcasts. I will be passing the hosting duties over to Tyler Coleman and Dylan Kleintop. I just want to give everybody a quick overview as far as what's going on. So in the podcast today, you are going to hear from several of our Central Penn Knights men's baseball players as they finished up their 2019 season. First, we're going to be joined by Connor Graham, one of the most dynamic offensive and defensive players on the team. And we're going to sit down with Connor and talk a little bit more about how he ended up at Central Penn College and reflecting on the season that was. So I'm going to kick it over to Dylan Kleintop, the Vice President of the Nightly News, and Tyler Coleman for this podcast. Take it away, guys.
Hello, Connor. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, so we all know that you had one of the leading on-base percentages, one of the leading batting averages, home runs, hits. You were just doing it all this year. But for the people that don't know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you like to do?
I'm Connor Graham, obviously. I'm from Southern Maryland, right around the Annapolis area. I went to high school in Northern High School in Northern Calvert County, and played baseball there all 4 years. JV my first year, got brought up for playoffs, and it was varsity for all 3 years. Then from there, I went to a Division III school in Virginia, and then from there I went to Anne Arundel Community College just outside of Annapolis, and then I found myself here playing for Coach Stern for this season. I planned on finishing my bachelor's degree here for the next season as well.
So I'm gonna try to find Christian in this
Of the Nightly News Media Club here at Central Penn College. If you look at the top 6 guys in the lineup, they're all batting well over 250, well over 275. So
Yeah,
I mean, the offensive was there. It's just defense. Like you and Quentin can't go complete games all the time.
definitely we did though. I think Quentin
that was just a little bit of the podcast. We had 4 different players on, as you can see, so it was about an hour long, a little over. Professor Miller edited some of it out. So this was the feature story that Mr. Coleman wrote. Although the season has been wrapped up, some of the players continue to be playing through the summer. Connor Graham, the guy you just heard on the podcast, will actually be playing internationally through his AAU program, and I'm sure Tyler can talk about what he found out from some of the players.
Yeah, so again, I got to talk with Connor about his summer plans, and he was just going off about all sorts of different stuff that he was doing. So it was actually very fun listening to him, because a lot of times people may think, well, these players of not just baseball but any sport, they might just play for 2-3 months or whatever it is, and then call it a day after the season. Well, talking to not just Connor but Christian and Quentin and Gabe as well, it shows that how much they actually care about what they're doing, and they're going out and trying to stay in shape and keep working on and improving their game. So here's the piece that Dylan wrote. Both of these were our feature story, and they were both published to the blog. This was just kind of a season in review. Talked about different player statistics, what went on during the season, some key highlights of what happened, and touch on anything else there, Dylan?
Touched on it all. I mean, for the nightly news, I would mostly, I guess Professor Miller would probably agree on this, I was like the sports guy, so I would write, after every season, I would write like a basketball review, baseball review, soccer review. So I knew I was doing this for the project, and I was like, you know what, I've been doing this for a year now, so I might as well just do it. I'll take the season in review, and it was like 2 to 3 pages long until I got through all the statistics, all the notable freshmen, the seniors that took charge, some highlights like Quentin pitching the 1-hitter, some like Chris Rosario, Jared Rivera, just talking about all those players in general. So like we said, some notable highlights that we had during the season. Mr. Heckard pitching in 40-degree weather the first home game of the season. Heckard also pitching a 1-hitter for the first time in school's history. Connor Graham, Chris Rosario, and Jared Rivera hitting some huge home runs, some monster home runs. Mr. Fulp, his stellar pitching performance. Mr. Fulp diving over the wall to make a spectacular catch that we all can remember. And Cam Woodward, his game-winning single that we actually got to live stream that game. So these are 2 games that Tyler and I chose to put on here for the live streaming, only because it's Mr. Fulp and Mr. Heckard pitching. So we're only going to show you like 2 to 3 minutes of each, because it was like a 2-hour game, 2 hours total.
Paulette behind the plate today. He, according to Robert Stern, saved them a couple of arms in the game last week. It was pretty cool to see Peyton really gut it out. Well, there's ball 2. Really gut it out. First appearance of the season, logged 5 innings, and was the nightly news player of the game for his efforts. His line might not have looked great, but he really kept Central Penn in that ball game, and that's really all they were asking him to do.
Well, sometimes when you're out there pitching, you got to take one for the team, and in the long haul, it'll help out the other pitching.
Behind him there, runs the count to 3-0 for Fall. It's got to be tough. Central Penn and Coach Stern even acknowledged their pitching has struggled this season, lost a couple people last season, some injuries here. And I did want to send out a kind regard to Freddie Barr, who suffered a pretty gruesome wrist injury in Tuesday's contest against Clark Summit. He will be out for the season. So we hope Freddie has a speedy recovery. He wants him.
So that was Christian Fulp pitching, and then here's the ace, Quentin Heckard.
The games too, so anything, every little bit helps. So we'd certainly appreciate if you guys are interested.
Yeah.
Let me know.
High quality food.
And it's from Mariana's. I mean, it's really, really, really good. 2-0. Top 2 here. We're gonna play 2 7-inning ball games. Little high and walked it.
Yeah.
Let's get that.
In steps number 24, Domingo Rodriguez. He's hitting 185 on the season, no home runs, 5 runs batted in. Leads the team in fielding percentage with a 982 fielding percentage. Wow. Deep fly. Fulp goes back. Just has enough room out there in center. But Rodriguez gave that one a ride for sure.
That was a good hit. It had some distance on it.
So that was just a little bit of what we did. Brian Christiana back there was commentating, Professor Miller, and Mr. Coleman was also on the commentation.
Yeah, so in conclusion, I would say that this was a very successful project. I actually had Professor Miller come to me about February and ask, he said, hey, would you want to be a part of the live streaming for the baseball games? And of course I was excited for the opportunity because I've been looking for a career in broadcasting. And I'm not sure about Dylan, but I had no idea this was really going to turn into our project for the class. So I was very thankful for the opportunity. So I think it worked out well for us. I think we worked out very well as a team. I'm looking forward to doing it again next year. And I know Dylan won't be with us, but I'm certainly looking forward to working more with Brian.
We would also like to thank Mr. Andrew Day and Mr. Christiana. He's not on here, but we would like to thank Mr. Christiana, Andrew for his photography, Professor Miller for guiding us through this project, and Brian for just being Brian. So, thank you.